As a senator, you spoke often and forcefully about the dangers of executive overreach. You warned America not to lose its moral clarity or sacrifice democratic principles for short-term gain. Senator Rubio recognized that we cannot allow the executive branch to unilaterally determine the direction of the United States foreign policy without accountability to Congress. Secretary Rubio is doing precisely what Senator Rubio feared, withholding congressional appropriated funds, stonewalling oversight, and acting as if laws passed by this body are optional. Secretary Rubio has presided over the dismantling and destruction of everything Senator Rubio once defended.
Gregory Meeks looked Marco Rubio dead in the eye and asked the one question that stripped away all the excuses. Was it worth it? Was it worth betraying every ideal you once claimed to stand for? Was it worth gutting America's foreign aid while children went hungry? Was it worth defying the Supreme Court, cozying up to dictators, and tearing down the very values you built your career on? Senator Rubio once warned about the dangers of executive overreach. Secretary Rubio has become the danger.
Secretary Rubio, I'm glad you are finally before this committee. Your testimony actually comes long after the State Department, under your leadership, took actions without required congressional consultation or that were contrary to the law. But I guess it's better late than never. But let me be clear, showing up months after the fact and refusing to stay until every member has questioned you for 5 minutes as entitled to under House rules are not the standards to which we hold the Secretary of State. Mr. Secretary, I've known you for a while, and I respected very much Senator Rubio, even when we disagreed. Senator Rubio was a principled statesman. Secretary Rubio, however, as we've seen in the past few months, is something different entirely. As a senator, you spoke often and forcefully about the dangers of executive overreach. You warned America not to lose its moral clarity or sacrifice democratic principles for short-term gain. Senator Rubio recognized that we cannot allow the executive branch to unilaterally determine the direction of the United States foreign policy without accountability to Congress. Secretary Rubio is doing precisely what Senator Rubio feared, withholding congressional appropriated funds, stonewalling oversight, and acting as if laws passed by this body are optional. Secretary Rubio has presided over the dismantling and destruction of everything Senator Rubio once defended. So although you may be the Secretary of State, the acting head of USAID, the National Security Advisor, the Archivist of America, the empire you have stumbled upon is not one of influence, sir. It is a kingdom of ash. So I ask, was it worth it? Was it worth it to allow the near extension of U.S. foreign assistance and USAID, which Senator Rubio said, and I quote, is a very cost-effective way not only to export our values and our example, but to advance our security and our economic interests? And lie is exactly what this administration has done again and again. Each time Elon Musk and his department of arsonists brag and mislead the American public about massively inflated savings or lie about the program they have cut and their purpose, they're not telling you about the food that rotted on the shelves while people went hungry, or the medicine that was undistributed to children needlessly suffering, or the trust that was lost by your actions. But I believe you know better, because you've said as much, and yet here we are. In 2022, Senator Rubio warned about the urgent and growing threat posed by China and called for a fully funded State Department and USAID. Senator Rubio wrote that soft power tools and alliances were vital to our national security. And today, Secretary Rubio is here to defend an 84% cut of the foreign affairs budget. How does hollowing out our State Department and dismantling USAID help us compete with China? How does the America Alone budget project American strength? On human rights, the contrast is even starker. Senator Rubio built his political brand on the cause of freedom and dignity. You condemned autocrats in Caracas, Havana, and Beijing for silencing dissent. But Secretary Rubio, he looks the other way when strongmen commit similar abuses. Secretary Rubio even defied a Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of a wrongly detained spouse of an American citizen. And when Senator Rubio became the first Hispanic American to serve as Secretary of State, he made sure to pull the ladder up behind him. In the name of dismantling efforts to making hiring and promotion fair, as you call it, wokeness, you have unlawfully dismantled programs designed to address decades of historical exclusion. These are not political experiments. They were congressionally supported efforts rooted in bipartisan recognition that our diplomatic corps must reflect the diversity and the strength of the nation it represents abroad. These are initiatives that Senator Rubio supported. You replaced experienced career employees with ideologues and political loyalists. Under your watch, sir, America's diplomatic and development corps have suffered the greatest brain drain in history, and America has been weakened and made more isolated by the actions of an administration that has abandoned its allies, cozied up to dictators, and conducted a foreign policy driven not by interests of the American people, but in support of the personal enrichment of the president and his family. And with that, I yield back.
Imagine watching someone betray everything they once stood for and being forced to ask them to their face, was it worth it? That's exactly what Representative Gregory Meeks did when Secretary of State Marco Rubio appeared before Congress. This wasn't a polite oversight hearing. This was a reckoning. Meeks called out a man he once respected, contrasting Senator Rubio, the lawmaker who warned about executive overreach, defended democracy, and demanded accountability, with Secretary Rubio, who he says has dismantled every principle he once claimed to uphold. And Meeks didn't stop there. He accused Rubio of turning his back on Congress, withholding funds that were legally appropriated, and acting as if the law itself were optional. He said Rubio presides not over an empire of influence, but a kingdom of ash. That's not just rhetoric. That's an accusation that under Rubio's leadership, U.S. foreign policy has been gutted, hollowed out, and reduced to rubble. Consider this. Senator Rubio once championed foreign assistance, saying it was one of the most cost-effective ways to promote American values and strengthen U.S. security. Now, as Secretary of State, he's defending an 84% cut to the foreign affairs budget. How does dismantling the very tools of diplomacy help America compete with China or project strength abroad? It doesn't, and Meeks made that hypocrisy crystal clear. But the betrayal goes even deeper. Rubio, the senator, condemned dictators in Havana, Caracas, and Beijing for silencing dissent. Rubio, the secretary, looks the other way when strongmen commit abuses, or worse, cozies up to them. He even defied a Supreme Court order to facilitate the return of a wrongfully deported spouse of an American citizen. Think about that. The nation's top diplomat ignoring a unanimous court ruling, as though the Constitution were an inconvenience. And then there's diversity and representation. When Rubio became the first Hispanic American to serve as Secretary of State, it was historic. But Meeks accused him of pulling the ladder up behind him, dismantling programs meant to ensure America's diplomatic corps reflects the diversity of the nation it represents. These weren't experiments or partisan whims. They were bipartisan, congressionally supported efforts to correct decades of exclusion. Senator Rubio supported them. Secretary Rubio tore them down, replacing career experts with loyalists, draining the State Department of its institutional knowledge, and weakening America's standing in the world. Meeks' final blow cut the deepest. America, under Rubio's watch, is weaker, more isolated, and more compromised, not for the interests of the American people, but for the enrichment of a president and his inner circle. And then came the words that hung in the air. Was it worth it? This is the heart of the confrontation, because what Meeks laid bare wasn't just policy disagreements. It was a question of integrity. A man who once defended democracy, now accused of enabling its erosion. A man who once warned against executive overreach, now accused of practicing it. A man who once spoke of freedom and dignity, now accused of betraying both. So let's step back and ask the same question Meeks asked. Was it worth it? Was it worth trading principle for power, values for loyalty, democracy for expediency? Because in politics, reputations are built over decades, but they can be destroyed in a single hearing, in a single question, in a single moment of truth. And that's where we are. Greg Meeks didn't just challenge Marco Rubio. He forced the nation to see the gap between who Rubio was and who he's become. And whether or not Rubio ever answers that question honestly, the damage to his legacy may already be done. So I'll ask you, Was it worth it? Was Rubio's transformation the price of ambition or the betrayal of everything he once claimed to fight for? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this clash isn't just about one man's career. It's about whether America's leaders still believe in the ideals they preach when power is on the line.